So hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Kitchen Table Talk in Action. And a special welcome to our speaker, Liz Kirkwood, who is the Executive Director of For Love of Water. And my name is Laura Dewey, and I'm the President of the Detroit branch of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. If you're not familiar with our organization, well, you should be. WILPF is a women's peace organization. It was formed in the aftermath of a conference in 1915 when during World War II, over 900 women traveled from the US and other countries to The Hague in the Netherlands to attend a big peace conference. And from there, they sent delegates to meet with nations' leaders to plead their case to end the war. And it was from that effort that WILPF was born. WILPF was one of the first non-governmental organizations with the United Nations. And one of our founders was the social reformer Jane Addams, who was best known for starting Hull House. We have sections in over 44 countries, and the US section has more than 35 branches, including one that was actually recently started in Florida by a young woman who said that WILPF is a good fit for all the issues she's working on. And it's because we are a multi-issue organization, and that's what attracted her. I'm going to call that the Ron DeSantis effect, because she's probably fighting a lot of horrible things in Florida. Anyway, our primary focus over the past 107 years has been peace and disarmament, but nationwide, we also work on issues like racial justice and the environment. And in fact, several years ago, I think it was over 20 years ago, when we used to have 3 campaigns for 3 years, we decided to make one of our campaigns focus on water. And we advocated for water affordability, clean water, and we created a wonderful study guide, and branches all over the country were using that as a basis for their work. So anyway, I hope that you'll get to know us, and you can check out our website. I'll drop in the chat later, or send us an email for more information. We're always looking for new members, and we're asking the younger generations to step up. So tonight, we're going to hear from Liz to talk about water issues, specifically the aged out Line 5 oil pipeline running under the Straits of Mackinac, water affordability, and septic tanks. And she'll tell you why septic tanks are important. Then we're going to go into Q&A and then get into the actions that you can take immediately after the meeting, actually during the meeting, on water issues. And we'll spend some time writing our elected officials. Okay, so we'll get started. I just want to give a brief introduction to Liz, although frankly, her bio is extensive and the brief one really doesn't do. As you know, she's the executive director of FLOW. She's an environmental lawyer with over 20 years of experience working on water, sanitation, energy, and environmental governance, both nationally and internationally. Liz serves as FLOW's lead on numerous Great Lakes issues and education initiatives. Liz testifies or speaks before public bodies, and she has made frequent presentations to community organizations like ours, as well as professional audiences on Great Lake issues, ranging from Line 5 to water justice and infrastructure. Liz develops and oversees FLOW's work on key Great Lakes environmental policies that are designed to promote healthy ecosystems, thriving communities, and access to safe, clean, affordable water for all. Now, before she joined FLOW in 2012, Liz worked for USAID in Thailand as an environmental attorney to implement a regional environmental governance, water, and sanitation program in Southeast Asia. She was also an environmental lawyer in San Francisco, where she represented clients on natural resource and energy-related matters. Liz graduated from Williams College with a degree in environmental studies and history and received her JD and environmental certificate from Lewis and Clark Law School. Liz currently serves as a member of the International Joint Commission's Water Quality Board. So with that, Liz, I'll take it away. I'll have you get started. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Laura. And I'm sorry we gave you the long version there. It's a true delight to be with you all here tonight. I'm very honored to speak before the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and am inspired by your work, and want to thank you all for being strong advocates to not only protect peace, but democracy. And it's a hard job. And so great work, and keep it up. And Laura made sure that we were going to really focus on action. So we're going to move through this presentation as quickly as possible so we can get to that work. So I'd like to speak tonight to you about some of the most important water issues here in the Great Lakes region. And I first would like to start with a water and land acknowledgement. FLOW is located on lands historically occupied by the Three Fires Confederacy, the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations. We are grateful to these sovereign nations sustaining their sacred waters since time immemorial, and are humbled to be a partner in protecting the Great Lakes watershed for future generations. We invite all to honor the first guardians of the water we love by incorporating the Anishinaabeg's water ethic and traditional ecological knowledge into our individual and collective relationships with water. I want to first give you a little quick orientation about who we are, and why you should know more about us. That's what I loved what Laura said. So I'm going to the Great Lakes Water Law that these extraordinary waters are healthy, public, and protected for all. Our founder, Jim Olson, is an extraordinary and inspiring environmental attorney who was the lead lawyer in the Nestle litigation representing the Michigan citizens for water conservation in the early aughts. And his vision of focusing on the public trust as this instrumental legal tool, has, and I'm sorry, I'm moving the screen so you guys can see my screen better, is really at the heart of our work. There are few legal principles that holistically protect public resources like water, like the public trust. And in a nutshell, this Western concept that really is, it is not unique to just Western law, because there is this sense, and I think often in a large part because most of us, we're made of 70% water. So we inherently know that there are some things like water that cannot be privatized and must be shared for all. And the concept of the public trust is that our state governments are sovereign and they protect these public waters in perpetuity for the benefit of all people to enjoy. So just a quick overview of our conversation tonight. I want to just highlight a little bit about the Great Lakes and what makes them so amazing. We will discuss just very briefly about the threats. We will be able to have a lot of other conversations about other than the one we're having tonight. And then I'd like to share some of our work with you about keeping our water public. So we'll be talking about clean water and water affordability, specifically groundwater that includes septic and line 5, and then we will end with the actions that we talked about. So I share this photo with you because it is a reminder of how globally unique this ecosystem is. Taken from space, you can see 20% of the planet's fresh surface water in this ecosystem. And every time I say that number, it still amazes me. Many of my friends growing up on the East Coast, family, really we're not aware of this extraordinary fact. But a couple of other fun things I just wanted to share, and maybe you know this, but if you were to take all of the water in the Great Lakes and to pour it over the lower 48 states, we would all be swimming in water 9.5 feet deep. The Lake Superior is so large that you could fit, it's actually larger than Ireland. This body of water is also larger than Taiwan. And it also is larger than the country of Costa Rica. And I'll share a couple of other facts. After Alaska, Michigan has more coastline than any other state. We have 3,288 miles. And the last thing I just want to mention is that collectively, this region represents the third largest economy in the world. 50% of all the US-Canadian bilateral border trade happens here in the Great Lakes. So the resource of the water is what makes this region is so vital. It is our economic engine. We also know that we are facing tremendous threats that are being exacerbated by climate change. There are threats to our water infrastructure system and other infrastructure, as you can see here in Chicago. We have issues with beach quality, with E. coli and other pollutants in the water that that cause beach closures. There's massive groundwater contamination. We have invasive species. Fish consumption becomes problematic because of the toxic chemicals. We have habitat and species loss. These deadly algal blooms connected to runoff from agricultural fertilizer and manure waste. And the list goes on. But we will now transition into trying to really focus on the work that we are trying, that keeps us motivated to address these issues. So, in thinking about the work that we have done over the past, this is our 12th year, I wanted to really underscore how the Flint lead crisis was really a turning point for both us as an organization, but also as a nation. And that was a moment where we were involved in the second Nestle battle, where Nestle was and ultimately was successful in securing an additional permit to pump millions of gallons of water in Michigan for $200 a year. And at the same time, there were, 100,000 people in the city of Flint who were being exposed to, poisoned water and paying $200 a month. And then, of course, there were thousands of residents in Detroit who were facing water shutoffs. And this moment for us really led Flo to work with frontline activists in Detroit and Flint to push for a statewide moratorium. Of course, this was so critical during COVID. What we saw was that in states like Michigan and other cities across the nation where there were water shutoffs were suspended, human health was greatly protected, and it helps slow down the spread of COVID. And so the last thing I just want to say here is that the work that we've been involved with to promote clean water for all includes this model legislation that I'll mention called Public Water, Public Justice that address this bottled water commodification and our failing infrastructure. Secondly, focusing on moratorium on water shutoffs. Thirdly, advocacy for federal water infrastructure funding. And thirdly, this equitable distribution of those water funds among disadvantaged communities. So I wanted to share a little bit with you about Michigan's water infrastructure crisis. You know, the first piece of it really has to do with the disinvestment that we've seen over the past 40 years from the federal government, with aging infrastructure, and climate change, of course, has really exacerbated this. The structural problems with the funding the water systems is that the burden really has been shifted to residential ratepayers, and with increasing inequity and many urban cores like Detroit that have lost populations, this has been you know, kind of a rolling and expanding crisis for water affordability. And then, of course, as we've discussed here, is that the story about water insecurity in Michigan really reflects a lot the broader patterns of racial and socioeconomic inequity and the structural issues that have to be fixed. And so there's, sorry about all the words here, but I want to mention this model legislation that we authored back in 2018, and actually a state senator in New York, Senator May, has picked up this legislation and she has introduced it into New York. And what it does is places public trust protection to the groundwater so that the state is the sovereign not only of the surface waters, but also the groundwater. By doing that, then the state can create a royalty and licensing system. So any bottled water companies that use groundwater or even municipal water systems pay 25 cents into a Clean Water Act fund, Clean Water Trust Fund. And then those funds go towards addressing water affordability or lead replacement line or whatever issues that you know, the state is facing. And in Michigan, we currently are having, advocates estimate that the water affordability crisis is costing us between 100 million and 250 million dollars a year. And so what is really interesting is that the revenue that could be generated from this is about $250 million. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about groundwater, and just want to have you think about the fact that there's so much groundwater here in the Great Lakes region that it amounts to a sixth Great Lake that would be as large as Lake Huron. It is hugely important for our everyday existence. You know, 45% of Michiganders rely on groundwater for drinking water. It's absolutely imperative for agriculture and manufacturing and the like. And we have more private wells than any other state. And so being good stewards to this resource is critical. We, of course, Michigan is the only state without a uniform septic code. And this is one of the issues that we are currently working with. Currently, working with legislators on drafting legislation that we hope will be introduced very shortly. And we've been working with broad stakeholders for many years now: regulators, scientists, municipal leaders, and frontline advocates, and of course the environmental health departments. The burden for private owners to replace their septic systems is another issue that we have really kind of delayed. And in rural areas, like where I live here in Traverse City, this is a huge issue that we know is critical to both public health and protection of our waters. And this is just a slide here that, we could talk all night about the other sources of groundwater contamination. But I think that's all I have time to talk about, because I really need to talk about line 5. But we can come back to this in questions and answers. So this is another extremely important issue to flow. We've been working to shut down line 5 for almost a decade now. And the image you see here is taken from the Upper Peninsula. And as you can see, the pipelines are drawn in here. And this pipeline was built before the Mackinac Bridge, 4 years before. And every single hour, about 1 million gallons of oil goes through these pipelines. And on April 23rd, this pipeline will be 70 years old. So let's step back here for a moment. Just want to share a couple more kind of background, just some more background information to give you a good understanding of how this 645-mile pipeline got here, why it's in the middle of the Great Lakes, and how are we going to possibly get this pipeline out of the open waters of the Great Lakes. We as an organization got involved. Well, let me getting ahead of myself. This pipeline, as you can see, this is line 5 across the Upper Peninsula from Superior, Wisconsin to the Straits of Mackinac, and then down lower northern Michigan, and then across the St. Clair River, and then over here into Sarnia, Ontario. And this pipeline, as you can see, is part of a very complex pipeline system known as the Lakehead system here. And the company Enbridge, of course, is responsible for the majority of these pipelines. And I want you to just see this pipeline. This is called Line 6B, but it has been renamed Line 78. And that's because back in 2010, Enbridge's Line 6B ruptured, causing over almost 1 million gallons of heavy tar sands to destroy a 40-mile stretch of the Kalamazoo River. And I'm going to go back to the map for a second. And it was because of that disaster that people started noticing and saying, hey, what's going on with this other pipeline that seems to be located in an even more dangerous location? And credit really is due to Beth Wallace, who is, she was from the Kalamazoo area, and she worked for National Wildlife Federation. She still does, and we are very close allies on this work. But she and Jeff Alexander wrote a paper called Sunken Hazard and alerted the eyes of the world started turning their attention to this hazard in the middle of the Straits of Mackinac. So I share these pictures with you because line 5 is 250 feet below the surface. And it wasn't until 2013 or so when NWF sent a diver down to go see what does the condition of this pipeline look like. And as you can see, there are quagga and zebra mussels all coating the exterior of this pipeline that's almost 5 miles across the Straits of Mackinac. And what we started discovering was a couple of things. Number one, first and foremost, this pipeline is located on publicly owned bottomlands held in public trust by the state of Michigan, which meant that jurisdiction really rests with the state of Michigan. And so right from the beginning, we at FLOW were advocating for the state of Michigan to revoke and terminate this easement. Instead, the state of Michigan, under the Snyder administration, continued to allow Enbridge to install these anchor supports that you can see in these pictures. And these anchors are actually braces that have these helical screws that go about 10 feet deep into the lake bed floor. And the idea was to help stabilize this pipeline. But all sorts of problems with that, because the Bechtel engineers who designed this pipeline in the 1950s actually believed that the lake bed floor would support the pipeline. So that, and one of the requirements was to have support every 75 feet. And so over, 8 years, we ended up documenting how Enbridge was in violation of these requirements with the easement with the state of Michigan. And I'll just share one more thing about these anchor supports that you see. The currents of the straits are so powerful that you can see in the lower right image that the anchor is bent over. And that's really problematic because Enbridge was authorized to put 228 of these anchors across the pipeline, and they have been moving back and forth on the pipeline, peeling away the cathodic protection and the integrity of the pipeline. And during those Snyder years, Enbridge knowingly falsified and told both state and federal regulators that there were no problems with these anchor supports. But in fact, these huge dinner plate size pieces of coating were missing. Well, I know we are almost at time here, but I want to just race through a couple of more things with you. One thing to consider is that not only has Enbridge's line 6B spilled over 1 million gallons, line 5 has also spilled over 1 million gallons over the past 50 years that we know. And this is, really critical to remember because we also have hundreds of other waterway crossings along the 645 miles. Over the years, in 2014 and then 2016, the University of Michigan conducted a number of oil simulations, and they looked and determined that over 720 miles of shoreline are at risk, both in Canada and the US. And of course, there are a host of unacceptable risks. Back in 2018, FLOW commissioned from MSU a study to look at the economic damage if line 5 ruptured. And not only would it be a $6 billion disaster towards drinking water and natural resource damage, tourism loss, property loss. But we also looked at what would happen to the shipping industry if the pipeline ruptured. And in 2 weeks, with the shipping in the Great Lakes halting, our economists estimated that it could be a $45 billion disaster. And that's primarily because taconite from Lake Superior would not be able to get through to the steel mills down in Indiana and Chicago area. Enbridge's proposal over the years, since the Snyder administration, is to build a tunnel. There are huge issues with the construction of a tunnel. As we are in this period of energy transition, the idea of allowing a 70-year-old pipeline to continue and build a special piece of infrastructure that would be in the billions of dollars to build, that ultimately taxpayers would be responsible for, really isn't kind of consistent with either Michigan's goals or the US or even Canada's, for that matter. The climate change impacts are very significant. As you see here, the operation of Line 5 is equivalent to 7 new coal-fired power plants operating every year. So quickly, I just want to share the alternatives. If you remember that map, there are pipelines that go around the Great Lakes, and those are the smarter and safer alternatives at this moment. We also know that we are in this moment of energy transition, and there is litigation on the Bad River Band's reservation, where Enbridge's own experts have under oath admitted that the gas prices, if you shut down Line 5, would only increase about half a cent in the US and 4 to 5 cents in Ontario. Now, the challenge, of course, is that we really need to have regional and international cooperation for Line 5 to shut down. And the call for not only energy security, but also water security really must be part of that messaging. This work to shut down Line 5 has been this extraordinary effort from organizations like yours, businesses. Oil and Water Don't Mix is one of our, we are one of the founding members and have been part of this really important voice to shut down Line 5. In the interest of time, I'm going to just really go actually over this slide, and then we're going to move into the actions for this evening. But as you may remember, in 2018, candidate then Gretchen Whitmer and candidate Dana Nessel both elevated Line 5 as really the most important issues to their campaigns and ran on the campaign to shut down Line 5. And they both made good on their word. The Attorney General brought a lawsuit in 2019, and the governor brought a lawsuit in 2020. For complicated procedural reasons, we are currently left with the Attorney General's litigation against Enbridge. And right now, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals is deciding whether or not the case will go back to state court or if it should remain in federal court, where Enbridge is hoping it remains, because they are characterizing the issues as a federal issue because it is an interstate pipeline. But if you remember, this pipeline would not have been built but for the state of Michigan's express permission under the 1953 public trust easement. And so what we're really talking about is a state's proprietary interest to protect water, public water for their people. And if Enbridge is correct that it is a federal issue and even international issue with this 1977 pipeline treaty that they're bringing, we are in serious trouble because the implications are that no state can be the sovereign of their public waters, and that they will be subjected to the private interests of multinational corporations. So this litigation is hugely important, both nationally and internationally significant. It has risen to the international level. I just read another article that came out yesterday that the U.S. and Canadian delegates are in treaty negotiations over that 1977 pipeline treaty that says that both countries cannot interfere with the free flow of oil, and that was established back in 1977 during the height of the oil crisis. And I referenced here the Bad River Band case that is really quite extraordinary because this, under oath, Enbridge tells a very different story than they do publicly about the fact that Line 5 is not critical energy infrastructure, and that when it shuts down, there have to be some adjustments in the system, and it will just take some effort, but it will be much cheaper to do that than to build a tunnel under the Great Lakes and to reroute the 12 miles around, actually would be now 41 miles around the Bad River Band reservation. So I'm just going to skip those legal slides. The last thing I just want to say about Line 5 that has happened recently is this is President Gravel from the Bay Mills Indian community. She's a tribal lawyer and leader, and she has been a very fierce and effective advocate in this fight. Bay Mills Indian community and 50 other tribes in the US and Canada and First Nations, as they are known there, just recently submitted this letter to the UN Human Rights Commission here on April 4th. So we're transitioning to the next part of our program to engage in conversation and take actions. And so the first thing that I would ask you all to consider doing is if you take your phone and put it up to the QR code. If you sign up for our e-newsletters, it's a great way to stay in touch and help us on issues about passing legislation on water affordability, or passing septic legislation, or repealing the no stricter than federal law, which hamstrings state agencies from creating more protective laws for public health, environment, and much, much more. Okay, the next action, the Sierra Club recently published a really beautiful piece called Battle for the Future of the Great Lakes. And if you put your phone up here to the QR code, you will see that it features Whitney Gravel, Patty Peak, Jacques LeBlanc, and I'm at the very end of the piece, but it's very, very well done. And then in the lower right hand corner with this QR code, this will actually take you to the Oil and Water Don't Mix page. And this action is important because you're asking President Biden to shut down Line 5. And so you're asking, well, how does that work? Well, because line 5 crosses international waters at St. Clair River, line 5 requires a presidential permit. And you may recall that the Keystone Pipeline and the presidential permit was a very big deal under Obama and Trump. And because this is an international pipeline, it also requires that presidential permit, which means that the president could actually take charge and decide once and for all that this piece of existing fossil fuel infrastructure should be phased out as part of the US's commitments towards our climate goals.
Thank you, Liz.
Shall I go to the next? I have one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I still have another one here. I know I'm throwing a lot at you guys, but I figured you were up for it. This action, if you get your phone here and scan this QR code, will bring you to an Earth Justice page to tell Governor Whitmer to stop the Line 5 pipeline tunnel project. I didn't have much of a chance to explain the status of the tunnel project, but I can share that with you right now. In essence, in order to build this mega tunnel, Enbridge needs to get approval from the Michigan Public Service Commission, and we are still waiting for a final decision. There has been, over 2 years of depositions and legal proceedings on that. And what is important to note about those administrative proceedings is that the issue of climate change has really been at the fore. And the state of Michigan wants to know what happens if we allow this pipeline to continue operating, for the next, 100 years, which is what the lease would allow. The permit from EGLE, which is the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, has been approved, but the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permit has not. It has been delayed for another 18 plus months. So this really does matter, and this is a place that you can lend your voice, and there will be other opportunities to do so. So please stay in touch. And then I have, other ideas, but we can turn this off, and then we can see everybody's faces and have a nice conversation. Does that sound good?
Yeah. So
okay.
Thank you so much, Liz. There's a lot of information, and I know there's a lot more. So I encourage everyone to go to flow.org and investigate more. I also put in 2 links for one of those actions about telling Biden to shut down Line 5, and another one asking the Canadian environment government to stop fighting the shutdown. So those 2 links are in the chat as well. We did want to take a little time for Q&A, and Leslie's going to lead that, but I had to mute people, so you'll have to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. Leslie, you can raise your hand, or if we can't see you, just put your hand up in the reactions.
Sure, I'll be happy to call on people. Liz, that was an outstanding presentation. I'm eager to learn more, and thank you for the resources to take actions. Does anyone have any questions? Yes. I don't see any hands. Go ahead, Misty.
Hi. I understood that that Gretchen Whitmer, in talking to the people with Line 5, was using the treaty of 1836, 2036, I think it was, with the Native Americans that said that all of this would be a part of the white people's lands, but they would forever have the right to hunt and fish on these lands. And so if the pipeline blew, they would not have the right to do that any longer. So is that still a part of the argument?
Well, thank you for mentioning that, Misty, and I do apologize for not providing more of background because it's there's too much information to share. So in addition to the state of Michigan being the public trustee of the waters in the Straits of Mackinac, the 5 federally recognized tribes have the 1836 treaty rights to the same area to hunt, gather, and fish. They have not formally raised their treaty rights in any litigation. And that's very important to note because those are the most sacred right. But even in the Bad River Band litigation for trespass and nuisance. And so in that case, Judge Connolly in Wisconsin has found that in fact, Enbridge is trespassing on the tribal lands, and therefore the tribe is entitled to damages and even potentially injunctive relief to remove Enbridge from their treaty lands.
Okay, and then also, as far as going through Wisconsin, do the Chippewas in Wisconsin having a lot of problem with that, aren't they?
Is it so I'm familiar with the Bad River Band where
Is that, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
that's
the Wisconsin band. I'm sorry if that wasn't clear. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where are you located, Misty?
I'm located in Empire.
Empire, Northern Michigan.
Yep.
My neighbor.
Yep. We just
Nice.
found that out.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd like to
Well,
say something.
Well, Sylvia
Please.
and Judith had her hand up, or
Thank you.
Ah,
uh,
okay.
Thank you. A quick question. I heard you mention Earth Justice. How much is the legal work going on with them at this same issue? I know I have written with them to my legislators.
Well, you will be happy to know that Flo, you know, we are lawyers here and we collaborate with Earth Justice, Environmental Law and Policy Center, all of the lawyers who are involved in the Bad River Band litigation.
Thank you. Good to
Yeah.
know.
So many wonderful, amazing legal minds are involved in this work. I just want to give a plug for the collaboration that happens because of the enormous implications for what's at stake. Thank you for your question.
I'm sorry, let's call on Judith next. She had her hand up. Cindy, you'll be after Judith.
Oh, okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz, for this great presentation. We're all just learning so much. I want to go back to one small piece. One of the charts identified that a small percentage of groundwater is industrial. What does that mean?
Let me think about this. I mean, for manufacturing, you know, it is that that segment.
So it's commercial.
It is commercial. The reason I'm pausing, Judith, I'm trying to remember. I wanted to see how much percentage it was. It doesn't matter, but it's the manufacturing piece of it. But the lion's share of water that is used both in Michigan, but both, across the planet, about 70% of groundwater is used for agricultural production. And so, as part of climate change transitions, we all will need to be thinking about less intensive water uses for agriculture, but also for industrial uses as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Cindy's next. I guess we have time for 2 more questions. Let us know
Okay.
where you're from, please, Cindy.
I'm from Detroit, and we have tried to get ozonation at the water treatment plants or infrared. I think is it infrared? Yeah. No. The other one. Anyway, that there's 2 ways to clean the water without using chlorine.
Oh,
And
ultraviolet?
It's
Is it
ultraviolet. I'm sorry, ultraviolet and ozonation is where they pump a lot of oxygen in,
Mhm.
and it oxidizes viruses and bacteria. And we'd rather see that for people. And really, I was interested in trying to figure out how to do the stormwater. So I thought when they go down the alleys, they should put
Oh, looks like we lost our speaker, Cindy. Go ahead, Suzanne. Tell us where you're from until she gets back.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Thank you, Liz, I'm Suzanne Thalen from Empire. And thank you, Liz, for talking about all of the work that you're doing and here in the state. My question is, because of national droughts and other types of pressures on water across the nation, what is being done regionally in the Great Lakes region and maybe even internationally to protect the Great Lakes from being further mined for uses for water in other parts of the country? I think we already have some precedent for giving water to other places in the Great Lakes region, but how about Colorado and the western side of the nation?
Yeah. Terrific question. And we should probably always lead the conversation with this, right? You will recall that back in 1999, when there was the proposal from the Chinese company Nova in Canada to use Canadian water tankers, put them in plastic bottles and then ship them to China. This idea just rang the alarm bells in the Great Lakes region. And that led to, in less than 9 years, the signing of the Great Lakes Compact in 2008. And that is a ban against Great Lakes diversions. There is, of course, a number of problems. There is the bottled water loophole in containers that are 5.7 gallons or less. And we have witnessed over the past 15 years, because this year marks the 15th anniversary, a number of requests, even from our neighbors in Wisconsin. All sorts of issues are going to arise from our neighbors in Illinois, where they're right on the boundary lines. And right now, very briefly, what I'll say, Suzanne, is that I think we, as a region, have started to sketch out and think about, ways that we protect the water, but it is not bulletproof. In fact, it's, I would say, much more thought has to be put into it. For example, what does the humanitarian exception mean? What are the contours of that? How long can a humanitarian exception be applied? So, if we're shipping water to some region that doesn't have water, is that indefinitely? We don't have a lot of guidance on it. And the 8 Great Lakes states will have to work together in unison to figure this out. And right now, we as a region, we don't even have that consensus. So to be continued and a lot more work needs to be done.
Thank you, Liz.
Yeah, thanks for the great question.
Okay, we used our time. We can stop our recording now. If anyone would like to stay on a little longer, we can do that. Laura, please unmute. Laura, you're muted.
Sorry, I just want to say a couple more things. If you want to learn more about WILF, I put our website URL on the chat, and you can also contact us, and I'll put the Detroit branch, and I'll put our address in the chat also. But after you take these actions that were on your screen and also in the links, I ask you to take one more action. When this is done, we will send the recording out. And if you could spread the word, this was an excellent presentation by Liz. Send people the recording to let them know. If they're not aware of these water issues, let your friends and family, coworkers know about it. So anyway, you're welcome to stay on and chat afterward. And thank you for attending. Thank you so much, Liz. I think Judith did you have a question?
Would everyone please say where you're from on chat?
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been